Hello and welcome back. I'm Toy. Welcome to another UVS Tools video. Today we're going to talk about 4-diff attacks and how they fit into the control economy thing that we've been studying. We're just going to look at 4-diff 3-control attacks. We're going to start looking at them in a vacuum. What we're going to evaluate is their output, basically their ability to progress us towards our win condition. If you watched my video on the 4 core choices of UFS, that's what I'm talking about. We're also going to kind of take note on which ones can pull our opponent away from their win con and which ones improve our game state and which ones debilitate our opponent's game state. We'll make notes of those. We're just going to start the process. I'm only going to do a couple of attacks at a time. This time we're going to cover the DLC attacks and the attacks from the new Kaden and Reese starter decks. I say new, but the re-released ones. So we're going to look at the 4-diff 3-control attacks in those sets. We're going to take note on which ones have blocks, which ones don't, what's different about them. On top of that, we're also going to evaluate things based on how they are on their own, just their speed and damage, how they are with one trigger of their abilities, and how they are with 2 triggers if it's possible. On some cases, we'll look beyond that if they're very common triggers, things like Shiva's Stomp. We'll look at that one a little bit further because Shiva already adds more cards in the card pool than 2 triggers worth. So, and Kaden's attacks are blank, and we have to account for Kaden being played. So we're going to take a few things into consideration when we're doing our evaluations, but we're going to at least start that process and start figuring that stuff out and start putting numbers to things, and hopefully it starts giving us a better understanding on how attacks are designed, how they're valued, and then we can use that information to start gauging what attacks we want to play or if something is as good as we thought it was when we start comparing it to other things. Bear with me. This is me learning just as much as it is me giving you guys information. So hopefully you learn something out of this. Hopefully you get something good. Let's dive into Ultra first. We'll look at some of the stats, and then we're going to dive into Tabletop, and we'll start putting this thing together. Okay, so what we have here is I stuck in all the attacks that are 4-diff, 3-control, all into one document on UFS Ultra. Because that way we can come down here and we can look at some of the stats that we got. So I got 217 cards that I found on here. There's obviously more in the DLCs. Interesting to note, the block spread on attacks. So out of 217 cards, 109 of them have blocks on them, so only 30 outside of that. That's just over 15% non-block. And then we'll also separate the non-blocks. So after we go through all these, we'll separate non-blocks from blocks, and we'll see what kind of value they add to a card if it does not have a block. That's an interesting thing to find out. And then looking at the average block modifiers, mid-blocks, and they're usually a little bit higher. And it seems to be a pretty even spread between highs and lows. We got 46 and 42 available, with, again, primarily being mid. More than double, just over double. So that's some interesting information. Coming down here, block modifiers, attack zones. So 99 mid attacks out of that number, with 40 low and 78 high. So if you're ever wondering about how much of a density of different things, low zone is still underrepresented in terms of attacks, but block-wise, it's equally represented, right? So that's an interesting thing to note. Block modifiers we talked about. Average damage, right? We have a range of anywhere of 1 to 7. So the 4-diff, 4 speed, 4 damage attack thing, right? That still falls true, right? So attack speed, the highest number is 4 speed at 96. The highest damage is 4 at 130. So 130 out of roughly 220 cards had 4 damage, right? So this just gives you some of those spread numbers. And I could probably go through and crunch the math on all of this, but I'm not going to jump into all of that. So there you are. You can look at that again really quickly if you want. If you care about the info on this thing, I can probably make this deck public. It's not private right now. I'll copy the Ultra link into the description of this video so you guys can check that out. So let's jump into Tabletop, and then we'll take a deeper look at some of these attacks, and we'll start piecing together some information. Okay, so we're here in Tabletop Simulator. I've got everything laid out that I plan to go over today and to kind of go more in depth into. So similar to how I did the speed hack video where I talked about as if my opponent was going to make 2 attacks, we'll also make the same assumption that we have up to 2 instances of any individual trigger to an extent. we're going to kind of have to play around with this, and this is a little bit of me learning as well, just seeing how an attack evaluation process would even go and what we can and cannot assume. And that's why I don't want to do them all at once. I want to do them in little batches so that I can learn, I can get some feedback, and I can hopefully get better at this process, and that we can learn together and try to gain some information out of this. So what that means is that anytime that there's like a powerful ability, we'll look at the card as if it's used as powerful 0, powerful 1, and then powerful 2. So we'll go through and we'll look at a card's power level if it has 0 triggers going off on it, if it has 1 instance of each of its abilities, or 2 instances, depending on what the card says and what the card wants. For some things that require resources like momentum, we may only look up to a 2 momentum consumption unless the card has something outside of it that would allow it to do more. Additionally, on cards, much like the Kaden ones that we have up here, we're going to look at it as if it's on its own, and then look at it possibly as if Kaden is the one piloting it. So it depends on which cards we're looking at and how things are on how we're going to evaluate it. Some of them are only useful to certain characters and under certain circumstances, so we'll try to look at that as best as we can. I'm not the master of what's in standard, or I don't have everything memorized. I don't know all that stuff. So I'm going to be trying to figure this out the best I can and hopefully pass that information on to you. So let's start looking at this, and we'll start figuring some stuff out. You'll notice over here, I got a tracker, I've got a bunch of dice out, and I've got a calculator in case I need it. So we can go through and we can look at all these things individually. So in terms of rating, when I add an arbitrary value to these things, I'm going to be looking at combined speed and damage. If a card has something on it like your opponent loses 2 vitality, I'm going to bundle that in with damage for now until I can start figuring out or coming up with a logical way to process it otherwise. So we're going to start putting things together that way and then see where things sit. And then we're also going to add notes. So I do have my resource symbols over here again. I'm going to try to add notes to the ones where they're purely variable, which means they can scale infinitely depending on the situation, versus cards that are more concrete and they can't scale on their own. Again, we're just looking at cards on their own, not with outside support, other than the possibility of niche characters if the card was specifically designed for them. So let's begin this process and see what we can get out of it. Okay, you'll notice right away that I switched to D20s until I can find a better way to just add numbers beside each card. This is probably how I'm going to handle it. So what you see beside each one on the D20, so we've got 8, 9, 7, 7, 10, 8, 8, 6, 8, 9, 7, 9, 8, 9. Okay, so they're all landing fairly well. The DLC non-block has the highest average or highest standard number at 10. Ballista has 7 in comparison to it. The ones with the good symbol on the bottom right-hand corner are the ones with blocks, and the ones without are the ones, obviously, that do not have blocks. So Ballista and Grenade Toss do not have blocks. So now we're going to go through and we're going to look at the cards a little bit more in depth. Let's look at Kaden really quickly, because some people might not know. So Kaden, your attacks with blank text blocks get powerful 3, and then you can respond after a card with a blank text block is played. You either give it stun 1 or breaker 1, or add a card from your hand to your momentum. So that's what Kaden does. So we'll assume that they all get stun 1, and they get powerful 3. Okay? So, at no instances of stun and no instances of powerful, we're looking at 8 value. Okay? If we're going to assume that stun adds 1 value to it, and then powerful 3 will add another 3, that's going to increase the 8 by 4, right? So then we're looking at 12. And then we can look again further because obviously we can't get a second instance of stun off, but we can get another instance of powerful 3 off for another 3 value, which brings us up to 15. Which gives Crushing Power Shock our arbitrary rating system 8, 12, and 15. Okay? So that gives you an idea of what we're looking at in terms of a scaling system so far. We haven't reviewed a lot and we haven't looked at a lot yet, so that's what we're going with. So that's looking at Crushing Power Shock. There's not a lot to look at. It's just a 2 high 6, 2 low block on it. We haven't come up with a system to look at whether a high block, low block, or mid block adds or removes value from a card, or if high attack, mid attack, low attack adds or removes value either. We can look at that kind of as we progress through the system, and then if we make that discovery, we'll kind of reevaluate things at that point. So we have Havoc Call next, which is 4 low for 5, which gives us a standard 9. Same kind of thing though. First instance will add 4 points of value, second instance will add 3. So that's going to take us from 9 to 13, and then from 13 to 16. So on paper, Havoc Call gives us more value than Crushing Power Shock, right? On average. We're we're not considering whether or not speed is worth more than damage or whatever. We can't look at that because depending on how you build your deck and what you're building your deck around, what your deck needs and what your design base is going to be different. So I can't really speak to that. I can only come up with weird arbitrary evaluation systems, and we get what we get. Okay, so moving on to Ballista, our first one with effects. Ballista is ranged combo punch. The combo enhances this attack will get +3 damage. Enhance, discard one card, choose one card in your card pool for the rest of the turn. That doesn't add to progressive difficulty. The value of that ability is, again, going to depend on your deck, what else you're playing, and how you're playing it, because that ability can have a value of 0, or it can have a massive value. It's far too fluctuating. The only things we can really look at are stats and damage. So I can give you the stats and damage of it, and then you have to decide what the extra abilities are worth, and then make those decisions from there. Ballista is giving us 7 average. There's no powerful, no stun, or anything on it. If we get that one instance of the combo enhance, it's going to give us +3, which is going to take this up to a 10. And because there's no way to get a second instance of anything off of this, like you can't combo again, there's nothing else put on it, it's just going to sit at a 7 and 10, right? Looking at Valiant Assault, 3 mid 4, again sitting at 7 base. If this attack deals damage, look at the top card of your deck, you can add that card to the bottom of your deck, and then you can enhance to draw 2 cards. Again, we don't have the value of cards yet. We'll probably gain that. But again, we're not looking at its ability to do utility things. We're not looking at its ability to draw us cards. We're not looking at its ability to give us foundations. We're looking at its ability to be an attack. That's what we're evaluating right now. And as an attack, Valiant Assault isn't doing a lot for us. It sits at 7, stays at 7 on its own in a vacuum. That's all it does. It does draw you more cards, and clearly that's a very powerful thing in universes. But again, it's up to you whether or not drawing more cards is needed in your deck, or if it's going to be beneficial to you. Coming over to Grenade Toss, it's a 3 high for 7 with no block. It has the card pool response. After your opponent partially blocks a ranged attack, they're going to lose 2 vitality. After you play this card, your opponent discards 1 momentum. So we're looking at 10 base, and it grows by 2 each time. So it goes up to 12, and then it goes up to 14. Right? It's up to you and your design to decide how you get that output out of it, and where you're going to put it in, right? Furious Stomp. This card sees a lot of play because we can scale it up so well, and on top of how this card works is it gets +2 damage for each card in your opponent's card pool. When you put cards into your opponent's card pool, obviously you're also increasing their progressive difficulty, which also soft increases speed. So this card's interesting. I'm going to evaluate it as if when we get one trigger of it, we are putting 1 card in the card pool, and we're going to treat it that way. And then we put a second card in, and we'll treat it that way. So putting the first one in will give us +1 speed value on top of the +2 damage value. And the next one we put in will give us +2 speed, and then +2 damage, because that'll be 2 cards in prog. We'll do it that way for now. Because if we put 2 in, we'd get +2 progressive difficulty off of it. So it's going to go from 6 on the first one to 9 on the second one, right? And then the next one would give us 2 triggers of Furious Stomp, puts 2 cards in their card pool, and gives it +4 damage, which means it's a 4 high for 6, which is 10, +2 in card pool, which is 12. So it's at 12. I'm doing my math wrong. 4, 8, 9, yeah, so that's right. 6, 9, 12. That's how it scales. If I hit a third trigger, I'm getting more speed and the +2 damage. So the interesting thing about the triggers with Furious Stomp is that the speed keeps increasing alongside of it. Because of the nature of this card and the reason we're going to put... Oh, I have an infinity symbol. Look at this. Hey! Bloop. Okay. We're going to put one on Crushing Power Shock, and we're going to put one on Havoc Call. Kind of. These ones are kind of. So, Furious Stomp has the infinity symbol on it because it can scale endlessly, which means that these numbers can keep growing, right? The card grows alongside your ability to put cards into your opponent's card pool, either via effect or just by navigating gameplay and getting your opponent to block things. So this card can scale very, very, very well. So even just on 2 triggers, getting 2 cards into your opponent's card pool, which is very easy to do, we get to 12. Shiva's base ability adds 4, and if we look at adding 4, that's going to be +8 damage, which puts it at 410, +4 speed. So it's 14, that's going to put us to 18. So I'm going to put a special note on this one for 18. Okay? So Furious Stomp on Shiva or on a 4 trigger gives us 18 value on it, right? That's really big. That's great. When you go back to cards like Crushing Power Shock, in order to get this value out of it, the 15 value, you need to have 2 momentum. That's not something that you can easily get. So yes, you can probably get a 15 value Crushing Power Shock off, but you're burning 2 momentum for it. And until we start looking into what the value of a momentum is, we won't quite know if that's a good payoff on average. Geo de Ray, Breaker 1, Stun 1, response after you block this card, at the top card of your deck to your momentum. Your opponent may discard 1 card to cancel this effect. Enhance if you have more momentum than your opponent. Destroy a foundation. Again, as an attack, this doesn't do anything on top of its 1 ability. So it goes up to 9. So Geo de Ray as an attack is only worth 9, right? So as an attack. As a block, it does more, right? If you have more momentum than your opponent, you can debuild your opponent. If you watch my video on the 4 basic actions of UFS, you're either playing cards to go towards your win condition, you're playing cards to pull your opponent away from their win condition, you're playing cards to improve your game state, or you're playing cards to debilitate your opponent's game state. So this card, as a card that moves you towards your win condition, is only worth 9, right? However, it also has an ability that takes your opponent and debilitates their game state, and then it also has an ability on it that improves your game state by giving you more momentum, right? So it can improve your game state, it can debilitate your opponent's game state, and it can be used as an attack, right? So it can be used to progress yourself towards your win condition up to 9 points. How well it debilitates your opponent's game state and how well it improves your game state, again, we don't have the knowledge yet or the information to put value to that, or even like to pretend to start putting value to that. So hopefully we'll get there. We'll see. Moving on though, Murderous Fire. It's a gauge 3, 4 mid 5. Again, we can't value gauge. If you have more characters in your staging area than your opponent, ready a foundation that has not been ready to combat phase. Again, improving game state. Gauge improves game state. If your printed hand size is less than your opponent's, this attack gains throw. So throw, this is the first time we come across throw. We don't know how throw adds value. Like we could take it throw and we could be like, it adds half of the damage to its value. We could look at it that way. Let's do that. Because the rules of throw say it adds half damage, rounded up. So we're going to say, as a throw, this is its throw value. It adds value to a card because it's a throw. We'll just do that straight up. But we're going to put Earth down beside it to denote that that's the throw value. That's how I've decided to do this, because we've got to come up with a way to measure this, and that's the only thing I can think of. So half of that will add another 3, which will put this to 12. Right? So we're assuming we get the 1 trigger if your hand size is less, so we trigger that on the 1 trigger, and it gains throw, which means that we're going to get a 12 value out of it. I'm comfortable with that. It seems to fit within the number math here pretty good, right? That lines up close to Havoc. Crushing, it lines up to Grenade Toss's numbers, right? Furious Stomp is an infinite scale, which seems to be it scales slower, so at 2 triggers it's hitting the 1 trigger of a regular attack. That seems to make sense. Yeah, I'm liking where this is all fitting. Okay, good. We'll move on. Until we come across something that makes us want to change this. Tomahawk Swing, 4 high 4, so it gives us 8 average. Response, discard 1 momentum after this attack, deals damage. Destroy up to X of your foundations. Build the top card of your deck for each one. Again, this is game state stuff. It modifies game state, so we don't care about that right now. The block modifier blocks this attack, it's +2. That's essentially +2 speed. At least it falls in the same category. So 1 trigger, that's going to take us to 10. There is no 3rd trigger on anything. That's all it does. It changes game state, and then it adds to block modifier. So very simple. 8 and 10. It ends off at 10. Stairwell Escape Shot. Now this one's going to be tricky because after you play it, remove an attack from your discard pile. This attack gains all keywords and their ratings. In order to properly figure out where this card sits, I would need to go through and come up with like what's the average multiple rating, what's the average throw, what's the average powerful rating, what's the average everything. For this one, I'm going to assume multiple. That seems like the best, or at least the highest standard output for resource input. So each momentum will give you another +8 on a Stairwell Escape Shot value. we'll just look at it like that. It has stun 1, and then it'll go into multiples. So we'll just look at that value-wise. That's how I'm going to do this one, just because I've decided. So we're looking at 8 on standard. If we multiple it and get the stun 1 off, it's going to go to 9 and then get another 8, which takes it to 17. The next one, oh my gosh, I need D10s. In order to get to the next one, we need to go 24 plus the stun 1, which takes us to 25, right? There you go. So this is where we're at for Stairwell Escape Shot. If you play this card, remove a multiple 2, and get the multiple 2 off, you're going 8 plus stun 1 plus another 8 value off of it, which takes you to 17, and then you get the second multiple for another 8 on top of that, which takes you to 25. Okay? So Stairwell Escape Shot. Well, but I mean, you see Stairwell Escape Shot played a lot, specifically for that output ability, right? Potential output. How you get there is a little bit more convoluted, but unlike the speed hacks one, we're not looking at how convoluted things are at this point. Maybe we'll do that later. Cowboy Lasso, 5 mid 3 for 8. It does have multiple 1 on its own, so it can add 8 to itself. Response, after 1 or more of your foundations are destroyed, build the top card of your deck face down. Again, this is game state improvement. We're not looking at game state improvement right now. We're just looking at the attack card's ability to move us to our win condition. And this one's very simple. It goes from 8 to 16. Right? Multiples just do that. That's why multiples are deadly, right? They can just kill people. Going on to Falling Star's Revenge, it's got the stun 1 on it. Commit 1 foundation if the stack deals damage. Add a copy of a committed foundation from your discard pile to your hand. Again, this is card draw. This is game state improvement. It's giving you more ability to play more cards and to push towards your win condition. So we're just going from 9 to 10. Right? Very easy. Stakeout. 4 high for 3 for 7, but it's got the stun 2 on it. If this attack deals damage, your opponent loses X vitality. X equals the stack stun rating. Enhance discardable momentum. This attack is +2 to its stun rating. If we assume 1 trigger on this of both, it'll jump quite a bit. We'll do a half trigger on this one just because if you have the momentum or if you don't have the momentum. So it has 7 standard. If it deals damage and we don't throw off that 1 momentum, we're going to get 7, 8, 9 for the stun 2, and then 2 more damage because of the enhance. So it's going to add 4 value to this, taking us to 11. Right? And then if we look at getting that momentum to get +2 stun more, that's another 2 damage and another 2 stun. So that's going to take us to 15. Right? There you go. Stakeout. That's its ability to push us towards win condition, up to 15. And then Reverberate. Sweet lord, this card. Okay, so Reverberate. It's got a 9 standard, 5 mid for 4. Enhance Destroy Foundation. The stack is +3 damage. Multiple copies of this attack and also this ability. So we're going to do it as if you do it on 1, and then as if you multiple 1 and do it on 2, and then if you multiple 2 and do it on 3. We'll do it that way. So we might actually need 4. Yeah, we'll need 4 instances for this card. I'm going to do it that way. So 5 mid 4. So it's got a standard of 9. If we play the 1 and we destroy 1 foundation and give it +3 damage, that's going to take it to 12. Simple, right? If we multiple it by 1, it goes from 9 to 18. Then if we add another 6 to that, we're looking at 24. Okay? 1 multiple, 2 foundations destroyed, takes us to 24. If we play out the full multiple and then destroy a foundation for each card, that's going to take the card from 9 value up to a 12 value. And then if we multiply that by 3, you're looking at 36. So this Reverberate, depending on how much resource you put into it, you can put up to 2 momentum, 3 foundations into it. I know we said we were going to just do 2 triggers or something, but this one I'm making exceptions already. That's okay. That's what we're here to do. We're here to learn and figure this out. So Reverberate, base value of 9. Just playing 1 copy, so no momentum, you can push it up to 12. All right, that alone is pretty good. So now looking at all these cards over here, right, looking at everything that we've got, 1 Reverberate with 1 foundation fed into it is the same as a Furious Stomp with 2 cards in pool, right? That gives us the same quote-unquote output. Same thing, a grenade toss with a half block, making them lose another 2 vitality, gives us the same output as a single Reverberate with 1 trigger on it, right? So that fits roughly. As soon as you get to one multiple with both damage triggers on it, you're jumped up to 24. Massive output, right? So the only other cards that can scale up to that, Furious Stomp scales up to that probably at its fifth card in pool. It starts putting out the same output as multiple Reverberate, right? Same thing with Stairwell Escape Shot. Once you multiple this thing out, you're up to 25 on it, right? It's putting up high numbers. But then this one, that's just a single multiple, is doing the same output as two multiples of Stairwell. So single multiple Reverberate, same output as two multiple Stairwell Shot. Good to know. I mean, clearly it's just doing that much more, and then you get the full thing out for 36. So looking at all these cards now, so we've done our analysis. Looking at all these cards now, I wonder if I want to go through and see if there's anything else I want to note on these. So we could do some more iconography here. So we can go, order could be cards that improve your game state. Fire will be cards that remove or debilitate your opponent's game state. And then we'll say life for cards that take your opponent away from their win condition. So life gain, essentially. So if you're removing your opponent from their win condition, it's life. If you're progressing by improving your game state, it's order. And if you are pulling your opponent's game state back, it's fire. So we'll go through on each one of these and we'll add those notations to it just so that we can start to understand how they add into the value of a card, right? So obviously Crushing Power Shock and Havoc Call do not have it unless, of course, we account for Kaden, right? So Kaden does say after you play an attack with a blank text box, either gains Stun, Breaker, or you gain a Momentum. They have the potential for it, but I'm not going to note them that way. I don't think I'm going to. Ballista, discard a card, choose a card in your card pool for the rest of this turn. That card does not count towards progressive difficulty. It is a game state improver. How well it improves your game state, your mileage may vary. Valiant Assault is definitely a game state improver. That's what it does. Draws 2 cards. If it deals damage, look at the top card of your deck. Add that card to the bottom. Game state, right? Game state, game state. This one, after you play this card, your opponent discards Momentum. That is damaging their game state. That's fire, right? Furious Stomp doesn't change game state. Geode Array, so we talked about this one. Add the top card of your deck to your Momentum, which can improve your game state, and then possibly destroying your opponent's game state. So that's going to give it both of these, just like that. Okay. Looking at Murderous Fire, if you have more characters in your staging area than your opponent, ready 1 foundation that has not been... so that's improving game state. Tomahawk Swing, discard Momentum. After this attack deals damage, destroy however many of yours, and then build the top card down for each one. That's improving game state. Whether or not it is actually improving game state or not, that's up to, again, you, your design, your deck, all that kind of stuff. Stairwell Escape Shot, after you play this card, remove attack from your discard pile. The stack gains all keywords and ratings. So this gives it the ability to take on Gauge, which improves your game state. Is there anything else that it can give it that will take my opponent's game state away? I don't think so. I don't think there's keywords that do that. Like, there's no keyword for destroying foundations, although that would be interesting. So this one has the potential to improve game state. Again, making Stairwell Escape Shot a very strong card, right? It can do a lot of things. Cowboy Lasso, after one or more of your foundations are destroyed, build top card of your deck face down. Only playable if you played multiple abilities. So again, it can improve game state. Falling Star's Revenge, commit 1 foundation. If this attack deals damage, add a foundation to your hand. Game state improvement. Stakeout has no game state improvement on it. None of that kind of stuff. Okay, coming back to Reverberate, same thing. It doesn't have any additional things on it that improve or damage game states. So now looking at the game state, modifying things. Ballista that sits at 7 and 10 improves game state. Valiant Assault that sits at 7 improves game state. So these ones have some of the lowest numbers on them, right? With Geode Array also being very low, lowest numbers. Looking at Falling Star's Revenge, also very low numbers comparatively to everything else. Same thing with Tomahawk Swing, very low numbers. And they do all improve game state, right? So the lowest numbers are improving game state. That's good. That's what we expect to see. However, we are seeing cards that, so like Stairwell Escape Shot is one. High potential output, also the potential to improve game state. Obviously not at the same time, but they still carry that potential. Grenade toss, right? For a non-block, this doesn't feel like it's doing enough. So now, like, looking at things comparatively to the non-blocks to the blocks, like Reverberate having a block on it compared to Grenade Toss not having a block on it, this makes no sense in terms of like power level and balance and stuff like that. Clearly, balance and power level are not something they care about at Jasco. And anytime you're designing a card game or you're designing something that's going to be marketed in general, like if you understand marketing at all, Reverberate was a promo in order to help sell something else. So it makes sense that this is the strongest card here, because the purpose of this card, beyond being in a card game, is to sell a product. So it's doing that with this, right? With 36 potential output, with a block on it, with great numbers. That's what that card's doing. But hopefully this helped. We'll do more of these. If you like them, please let me know, because then I'll continue to do them. If you guys don't like them, then I'm going to stop, because they're quite a bit of work. Yeah, that's it. So hopefully this was helpful. Until next time, this was Toy.